Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your pilot, Ian Richard, with Gamer Airlines speaking. Weather today at our destination is sunny. We are looking forward to a short, smooth 1-hour hop to our final destination. As a reminder, we will be making a water landing this afternoon, but that's okay because this is a seaplane. The cabin crew will be around shortly with drinks and food for purchase. So buckle up, settle in, and please enjoy the flight.
Excuse me, sir. I didn't get enough champagne in my mug.
It's my birthday. Can I get some wings?
Beer's included on this flight, right?
Okay, and are we ready to start the podcast pursuit? Hello and welcome to episode 78 of the Game Brew Podcast, the bi-weekly video game podcast where, in the event of an emergency, masks will fall from the ceiling. Please remember to put masks on any Allisons before yourself, as we care more about her than any of these other idiots. I am your host, Ian Brimstone Richard, and I'm joined by Dan Omenratz.
It's an HP computer, right?
Chris Cypher Wrights.
Fuck Neo, am I right?
That's pretty good. Allison Viper Vandevender.
I'm a sneaky snake.
And Will Phoenix Shell.
Can I play this on a Mac?
Today, during the first half, we'll be talking about the problems with data mining, and in the second half, we'll discuss the tyranny of choice. But first, it's time for a beer.
Oh no, my fingernails.
You used your fingernails to open that beer? Jesus.
What is wrong with you?
Chris, what are we drinking this week?
I haven't had fingernails in like 20 years, okay?
Wait. Oh, sorry, before we talk about this beer.
Yeah.
Did you open a can or a bottle with that?
It was a can.
It's a can. Okay. I thought you were like a heathen that could open
Dan's
bottles with their fingernails. Jesus.
Again, haven't had them for 20 years, so it's weird that I do now.
This week we're drinking Loose Cannon. So, some backstory. Loose Cannon we decided on because it's a local brew in Maryland. It's made in Halethorpe, Maryland, pretty close to Baltimore.
It's a well-regarded town.
It's a well-regarded beer, that's for sure. And it's one of my favorite beers. I think I mentioned on the last episode that it's kind of one of my go-tos. It's a really good IPA, very drinkable. It's not super hoppy, but it's got a good flavor. It's a little sweet.
A little sweet.
A little fruity, but it doesn't actually have fruit in it. They kind of use it as their base beer. I picked up a pack of different loose cannons, basically. So they have their regular loose cannon, double cannon, Americannon, and Tropicannon. So like they just different variations on it. But it's a very good beer. It's one of my favorites.
The double cannon is called looser cannons, right?
Looser cannons. That's the chain. That's the chain shot version. No, the great thing about Loose Cannon is that it's one of those IPAs that it's not quite as mild as like an all day IPA or like a session IPA, right. But it's a really good way to get people who don't like IPAs into IPAs.
Yeah, and it's a little more than like a session IPA because it has the full alcohol-ness to it. I put it in the same, and being from Maryland, I put it in the same realm as Flying Dog's
Raging
Bitch, and Dogfish Head's 60 Minute.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
With a little citrus twist.
Of those three, I like Loose Cannon the best, though.
Nice.
Yeah, Loose Cannon was actually the first IPA that I learned to love.
I really liked it.
You could
get this in Harrisonburg pretty easily, where we went to college. So I remember drinking this a lot in college, too.
You used to drink it on tap at the Griffin Tavern in, what is the name of that town? It's in Rappahannock County somewhere. It was actually a really great
tavern. Griffin Tavern.
Good trivia night.
Shout
out to the Griffin Tavern.
Are you sure that wasn't in like a D&D campaign or something like that?
God, I wish.
Hail and well-met, adventurers.
There is nothing...
Welcome to the Griffin Tavern.
There is nothing that I would rather be doing during
this like stay-at-home crisis, then play D&D, but somehow I'm not doing that. Like, if you have
only-
a D&D thing out there that you want to invite
Man,
me
if only
to,
we had someone that like
would love
was
to
a
do
dungeon
that.
master.
If only you knew any dungeon masters at all who regularly harass you to play Dungeons and Dragons, then
I'm in, man. I'm in. Tell me when to be. I will make a character. You know I'll be there, Dan.
yeah, sends out the email. Hey guys, we're scheduled for this Friday. Oh,
Ooh, yeah, about that. Yeah, I gotta finish those TPS
thing.
reports.
I have to. That's my designated masturbating time, so I can't,
Yeah, and I can't. I don't think you want that happening. I
can't put that off again, man.
All right. So what I'm drinking this week is a drink called a Salty Dog. I wasn't able to get Loose Cannon because the grocery store I was at didn't have it, and I was trying not to wander around to all the grocery stores. So what a Salty Dog is it's gin. You can do some tonic or some, I did ginger ale in this one, and grapefruit juice, and I've got some actual grapefruit filling on here, and then you salt the rim of the glass. It's a really nice sort of summer, fruity sort of thing that'll get you nice and schwasty.
So it's kind of
Well,
like
all right.
like gin grog.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little
It's
bit.
like, it's what the pirates
Yeah.
drink who,
British,
you know,
well, no, British
also
pirates drink
happen
rum.
to enjoy Broadway musicals. It's what the Pirates of Penzance drink. That's what it is.
Yar, I don't know about you, but I think Gypsy is a super underrated musical.
Yar, personally, Carousel be my favorite, yar.
Have you seen the Hamilton musical, Yar?
Oh, yar, don't you know?
That Lin-Manuel Miranda is a national treasure.
Arr, yippee, yippee.
Ian, did you just try
Yar,
to
kinky boots.
Midwestern
I've got
that
some
up
kinky
up
boots.
there with a "Don't you know"?
I did, for some reason.
No.
That's a pirate.
There are no Midwestern pirates.
Yeah, there's no Midwest.
No,
They'd be
that's not
like-
true. He's a pirate on Great Lakes, Lake Michigan. Very scary fellow.
It'd be a little too polite, I think, to be a pirate.
Get in the chest there, please. There now.
Oh,
Don't
so
you
sorry
know? And
to-
can I have your cheese?
Avast there, buddy. Sorry to
Hey, sorry about
damage your
that.
ship.
Hey, did you see the Packers playing?
Hey, Allison, what are you drinking?
I am going with the pirate theme and drinking
Yar.
Kill Devil Rum, which is actually bottled and distilled in the Outer Banks.
Ooh,
Ooh.
OBX.
Is this
Yeah.
a dark spice rum, or is this more along
No,
sapphire varieties?
sapphire. So it's rum with pecan and honey.
Ooh,
Ooh.
And I think me drinking spiced rums almost exclusively has ruined me on rum like this. Like, it's good. It's sweet. It's smooth. Kind of antiseptic-y, more so than I'm used to.
You.
I think that's because of the spice in the spiced rums. Like, that kind of, like, mellows everything out for me, if that makes sense.
You said this is the pecan?
Right. And it just gives it, like, a nice flavor. And this is just a little harsh. Like, I mixed it with some Coke. And it's good. It's kind of vanilla cokey almost tasting, but sweeter. But it's just,
It's a little too bitey.
yeah, it's a little too bitey. I prefer spiced rums, definitely.
Very cool. Well, let's move on to what we've been playing this week. I know that a tiny, little, insignificant remake came out, but we'll get to that later. Aside from some kind of thing involving some character named Squall or something.
Yeah, exactly.
What have we been playing?
I've got a couple bwap whap whas to
Oh
put up
my
there.
gosh, let's get the bwap bwap wah train going.
All right. So it was kind of a zombie-filled couple weeks because, in case everyone forgot, with Final Fantasy VII Remake coming out, Resident Evil 3 Remake came out
Right, yeah.
2 weeks
It
ago.
did.
Also, they announced Resident Evil 4 as a remake soon.
Wait,
Not soon,
seriously?
but
No,
like-
don't do it.
Well, it's.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, for like 2021, I think.
Ugh,
that could be
bad
it
idea.
could be
Remaking them
interesting.
all.
I mean, they would just expand some areas, which would be kind of interesting. But
4 was
but,
a masterpiece.
It was.
Okay. So basically, Resident Evil 3 kind of. For those of you not familiar with Resident Evil 3, it takes place kind of at the same time and a little bit before Resident Evil 2. So it's in Raccoon City, but you play Jill Valentine again from the first game because she was almost a Jill sandwich, and basically like it starts out that you're just like in your apartment, and then all of a sudden this giant thing breaks through the wall and just starts chasing you. It's called Nemesis, and it's terrifying. Mostly because in Resident Evil 2, there's Mr. X, and everybody was a big fan of Mr. X because you like hear him stomping around. He can't really kill him or do anything like that.
And he is very scary. Nemesis is kind of the amped up version of that, where he's way scarier because he's not just a guy chasing you around. He has like attacks that he does. He turns zombies into weird, more dangerous zombies. He has this arm that can like go out and grab you. And he's aggressive. Like he is coming after you. Yeah. Not like slowly, but quickly. Like you'll try and go through a door. He'll leap, jump in front of you, and then stop you from going through that. So you have to like run around and find a different thing. So overall, it was fun. It's a little bit more shooty than Resident Evil 2 was. Resident Evil 2 is a little bit more about puzzle solving. This one, puzzles were a little bit secondary to more so strategizing around combat stuff. Yeah, and that's kind of the trajectory of Resident Evil games, right? Like they get shootier and shootier and shootier until Resident Evil Giraffe happens, and then post Resident Evil Giraffe, the shootiness sort of drops down again.
Right. Well, and a lot of people, no, pardon my French, but a lot of people shit on Resident Evil 3 because it's kind of like it's a little short. The original one was a little bit short. This one was definitely shorter than Resident Evil 2. 7 hours for me to beat it on standard difficulty.
Right.
And there's like you can finish it in par time, which is like 2.5 hours if you skip all the cutscenes and like run through it. But yeah, 7 hours to complete. And people, because it got a little bit more actiony, and all the puzzle people were a little bit upset about that. But that led the way for Resident Evil 4, which, as Will said, is a masterpiece. And it kind of
certainly a classic.
It reinvented the Resident Evil format, which was really cool.
Yeah, it reinvented the Resident Evil format, but I don't know if it did so. Like Resident Evil 4 was certainly a success, and I liked Resident Evil 4 here, but I also think that the following Resident Evil games in that same vein really were not good games.
They were not as good.
And led to the basically tearing Resident Evil down back to the bones, so to speak, and then building it back up for Resident Evil 7. So it's interesting to me that they're already thinking about remaking Resident Evil 4, and that's why I'm like, no, we went down this road already.
Yeah, just leave it. And then I also finished, because Capcom games, I was in a zombie mood. I just kept zombieing it up, and I finished Dead Rising 4, which was good. They took out a lot of the things that made Dead Rising 1 through 3 good, in my opinion, and they made it a little bit more about just kill as many zombies as possible.
Okay.
Like, one of the things that I really liked about it about the Dead Rising games was the aspect that you had a time limit. Like, you had a certain amount of time to do things before, like, either a character dies, or somebody gets infected with zombieism, or they blow up this mall or town or whatever. So instead, they kind of just give you, okay, here's all your objectives. If you happen to be close to any survivors, they will only live for a certain amount of time, but there's no like overarching time limit for you to do things in. So that made it a little bit more smashy and a little bit less about managing your stuff, which I guess
I kind of felt like Dead Rising 3 was leaning towards that anyway, in a lot of ways.
I mean, in Dead Rising 3, they did kind of get rid of the zombie infection stuff, where you couldn't, like, there weren't people infected with it to worry about, like in Dead Rising 2. But in this one, it's like there's not even like you have to get to this point in like 12 hours. It was just like, you can spend as much time doing whatever you want, and then if you choose to go on with the story, you can do that.
Does anybody else have any blah that they want to share?
I do.
Oh man, we have lots.
Yeah, Will.
I have finally rolled credits on Horizon Zero Dawn. I came back to that and plowed through the rest of it. Oh, God. Easily top 5 stories in games of all time for me. Easily.
Really?
It takes
All right.
something
On his list.
with spoiler free, it takes something that is a very familiar type of story and tells it in an incredibly unique and new way that I don't know that I expected from the beginning.
Are you able to tell us what type of story it is without giving any spoilers?
Oh yeah, like it's very obvious from the first few minutes of the game that society has collapsed. Like it's super obvious because here you are, these tribal people with bows and arrows, but you've also got like metal sort of technology, like garb, and then you're fighting like big metal, like
Robots.
saber-tooth robots that
Robot
are running the
dinosaurs.
world. Yeah. So it's very obvious that like you're going to uncover something about how all this happened, but just masterful narrative storytelling. Really, really fun gameplay. That game got me to like crafting, and I hate crafting in games. I hate it.
Wow.
But everything has a use in that game. Every armor, there's not a best armor. Like there is if you get some super special stuff later in the game. Like, but that's like an extra. Everything has a form and a function. And this armor may be best for this situation. But then later on, you may need to switch to the other armor, and your weapons are the same thing, so it always keeps you on your toes, and the crafting is actually useful. And I really, really got into that and just loved it. Just top 5 games for me, easy.
Man, if PS5 wasn't coming out this Christmas, I would maybe buy a PS4 to play.
You can play it on your
play
PC.
it
You
on
will
PC.
be able to still play it on your PS5.
There you go.
And
also
PC,
on
yeah.
PC.
True.
And also
I
on
forgot
PC.
Chris, you had a wrap up why you wanted to share.
Yeah, I finished Doom Eternal.
Nice.
It was good.
Did it maintain that same pacing all the way through that Doom did? Because that was one of the great things about Doom is that, like, it never slowed down. It just kept getting cooler and bigger and more complicated. And so that's a difficult barrier to sort of break through, a difficult thing to do again.
I don't think that the other Doom 2016 did not have the intensity that Doom Eternal had. There were moments where at the end of a fight with Doom Eternal where I just had to take a deep breath.
Really?
He had to replace his
Yes.
damn keyboard because he broke so many keys playing.
I literally had to buy a new keyboard because I broke some keycaps on my keyboard.
That's
from that game.
fucking metal. They would like to
Yeah.
hear that.
Yeah, no, it was really intense and really good, and there was, I think, maybe 1 or 2 fights that I had to turn difficulty down, but I tried to keep it on the Hurt Me Plenty difficulty, which is what I assume is the normal difficulty, but like they don't like.
It hurts plenty.
Well, go play it. And you'll understand. It's hard and it's good and it's intense and it's a really
metal.
well done game. It's a metal game.
Yeah,
Very metal.
And what I was trying to ask was like, does the pacing for the game continue to accelerate, or does it level off at some point?
I would say it kept going.
So it kept going, but like they do a really good. There was one mission where they like there's I don't think like almost any combat where they're talking about a lot of like the Argent. They're basically telling you stories.
Yeah.
But they do a good job of like giving you super intense sections combined with just kind of a little reprieve from it, and they balance it pretty well for the most part, I would say. But it's a good game. I'm not sure if there's a ton of replayability, and I haven't tried out the multiplayer yet. But like, I don't know. I really enjoyed my time with it.
Awesome.
And the music's fucking awesome.
And really quickly, I do want to touch on the big remake that came out this week, Final Fantasy VII, which of course stars Cloud. I was being very sarcastic earlier. For those of you who've played it, what do we think?
No spoilers, please. I haven't played it.
Aerith dies.
Son of a bitch. Wow.
Well, I mean, not in this one, technically, probably.
True, not yet.
Aerith does not die in this one, and I'm going to say that.
No, don't say that.
It just doesn't get to
It's
it.
that one
Chill.
gets even close to that part in the game.
Yeah, because they're still in Midgar, right?
Here's the thing: you're putting this voodoo out on me that it's not going to happen eventually, and I need it to happen.
So I've completed it.
Good God, Chris.
And so this only encompasses the Midgar section.
Yeah.
Right. It ends at the end, I think, of the motorcycle section.
Oh, it ends at the end of the... You don't even get to meet Sid?
No.
Well, Sid's
Who's
like
Sid?
right outside of.
This is also my first full Final Fantasy.
Yeah, Chris hasn't
I haven't
played it
played
before.
Final Fantasy 7.
You don't know what happens?
Like,
No.
I know what happens.
He's watched like a quick drill down. We talked about this before the podcast.
Okay.
So I've watched the quick drill down. I played the original one like probably. I know I played it past Wall Market. I can't remember how far past I got.
God, you didn't play it at all then.
You haven't played Stardew Valley or Ocarina of Time. Shut up.
Suck a dick.
No, those are not equal things.
Yes, they are.
No, they're
Ocarina
not.
is.
No, they're not. Anyways, so I have a question about this.
No.
Sure.
In the original game, in the translation to English, they screwed up Aerith's name and changed it to Aeris, Aeris, instead of TH. Did they leave that for this version, or did they change it?
No, it's
They
Aerith.
changed it back. It's Aerith.
They changed it. I kind of wish they'd left it.
No,
Because
because
I
it was
grew
wrong.
up with Aeris.
Yeah,
Literally
same.
everything else, she's been Aerith. Like the whole like.
Not in America.
We're about to have a very weeby sub versus dub moment.
Yeah.
Will absolutely watches the dub.
Well, I'm a sub person, but what I'll say is, like, the things I grew up on and didn't know that they were done a different way. Like the first Sailor Moons, I prefer the storylines of the other ones. Like, I kind of like the way that it sounds in English because that's what I grew up on. So I get where Will's coming from in that sense. But no. Yeah,
So-
I'm glad they changed it.
Great. Yeah. So next week the next episode we'll do a deep dive into Final Fantasy VII stuff. But for now, we do want to move on to topic one, which is the problem with data mining. So in the past couple of years, especially with games that tend to release a lot of content over time, League of Legends, Overwatch, there's been this focus on people who data mine what they're currently working on and sort of ship it out on social media. And the problem is that this creates a system wherein developers are trying to hide what they're doing, and the people who consume the content are trying to find what they're doing. And there's sort of a tension there. And it changes how we perceive games, and so we wanted to talk about it. Allison, I know this is something that you've been digging into a lot recently, so I wanted to kind of give you the floor right away. What do you think about data mining? Is it hurtful or is it helpful?
The thing is, I can kind of see both sides of it. I understand. I think it's hurtful overall because it's kind of like cheating in a lot of ways and finding out things that the creators don't want you to have yet.
Yeah. Someone might respond to that and say, but what I'm trying to do is to get what they're working on out there so that people can respond to it, right? If I have the information earlier, then we can form opinions on it and let the developer know what it is we really want. Whereas if we're left in the dark, then the developer is more in control. And Apex Legends sort of had a particular spin on this whole data mining thing. And Allison, I know you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the year, they took a really hard stance against data mining, actually, because it was happening a lot in their games and they were getting really frustrated that characters were being leaked before they wanted them to.
So this is Respawn Entertainment, just to clarify. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah. So with that, the one of the lead developers, Drew McCoy, he went ahead and just responded and said, since it keeps popping up, leaks are the absolute worst. I've never worked on a single project where it was purposeful or wanted. Spend an insane amount of time and energy to create cool surprises. Really sucks when somebody wants internet points so bad that they ruin that. So they were doing that, and the lead guy who's been leaking all the content for their games kind of responded and was like, look, they haven't seemed to be annoyed until now, so I'm going to stop doing it. And so he stopped leaking data.
Oh, interesting. The person who was leaking the Apex data actually said, okay, we're all right, I'm out.
How much do you want to bet that was actually them sending him a cease and desist letter instead of like being him actually being like, oh, well, they said no to do this.
That's true. Could be a thing.
I would believe it.
He was called That One Mining Guy is his tag. And he said that he was like, I gave something Respawn wasn't giving people. It was kind of hope, something to get excited about. If they don't want me to do it, I'm not going to do it, was his stance.
Well, so do you take the side of the developer, or do you take the side of the leaker on that? Because I feel like you could argue both sides.
I personally am on the developer side with this because I'm a
Same.
person who doesn't like to be spoiled anyway. So I find it hard to dodge those things that aren't intended to be leaked yet, but are out there on the internet if I'm searching about a game. So I don't like those landmines personally because I don't want to have that content early.
Do you think there's anything to the idea that if a leaker leaks something, that allows the game's community to respond in a way that can inform the developers developing of the game, like get feedback, or does that not factor into this equation?
I think that the problem with that, kind of what some people think with data mining, and that is like, oh yeah, I'm just giving the people what they want, which is a peek at what's going on. But if someone's trying to surprise you with something, which is kind of like to another industry, like with movies and stuff like that, which is where it's like if you go to a movie, like if you go to see an Avengers or a Star Wars, and you are like, oh, I want to tell everybody about this cool twist that's in it so that they know about it, it's like that's going to ruin the movie for people, and they're not going to want to go see it.
Yeah, I can understand that. I guess what I'm saying is, like, it's not like a twist in a movie when a new character is released on Apex, right? It's actually more like, hey, here's this new thing we developed. What do you think about it? In a traditional sense, when there's not this kind of data mining, there's maybe not the same kind of community response that there would be to something like a new character that could really change the game. So if they release a new character and people are like, oh, this looks terrible, I don't really think this is a good idea. If you think about how it interacts with the game, it's not really a great idea. The company could respond to it in a way that's perhaps more positive and more taking in the feedback of the people in the community.
I think that by releasing a lot of that stuff early, or having it leaked early, you like get people riled up and get them started talking about something that maybe they don't need to be talking about yet. And like use it or play with it in the case of a game when it comes out and see what you think about it and actually experience that. And I think that there's something to be said again for like really like close guarding that stuff. So I'm kind of a fan of not seeing this stuff leaked out early for that reason. It just gets people riled up and like the trolls going early.
Well, what you're saying is that people are making a judgment on something that they might not really understand.
Yeah.
Chris, what are your thoughts?
So I kind of like it because it kind of gets my excitement going. Like it kind of gets my creative juices flowing almost in a way. Like it makes me think about, oh, what if it is this good? And it's one of those things that, and I'll relate this to hardware. AMD often has leaks where their either new processor or new graphics card will be on par or better than the competition. And for me, that's kind of exciting, especially as them with being an underdog. It makes me pay attention to them more, and sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. But it also makes it so I take everything that's leaked with a grain of salt. But,
yeah, there's a certain drama to it, but you need to be a savvy consumer to be able to make those decisions, because sometimes people come out and say, like, yeah, the AMD, like AMD Vega 64 is going to blow the 1080p or the 1080 Ti out of the water, and then come to find out that it doesn't. And instead of feeling excited, now you feel deflated.
Yeah, I mean, there was some leaks that came out, I think, at the beginning of 2019 that said that they were going to be expanding a lot of the Ryzen, the second generation of Ryzen stuff to kind of more cores and on higher clocks. And I was kind of digging into it a little bit, and I was a little bit, I guess, deceived, but at the same time, I was also kind of skeptical. And I think I said on that episode where, if it's even a little bit of this, it's still a good thing. So it kind of boosted my excitement. But I also think that AMD uses that to their favor for sure.
Well, but I think, and Allison, tell me if I'm wrong in this. But Allison, you tell me what I'm wrong most of the time, but that's okay.
Part of the day.
So there's a big difference between that, where it's releasing like the specs for something, or it's releasing a new product. Don't shake your damn head at me, you son of a bitch. I'm just kidding. But where it's the difference between something like that, where it's like they're already in production with something and it can't really affect it, versus like an existing property where they're releasing more content for it, but they want it to be a surprise as to what it is, especially with like your Fortnites, because like Overwatch, any of those things, because it's like okay, you guys don't play Fortnite, but there was the big thing whenever they did the season 2, like Fortnite season 2, where they did like the whole black hole event. And if somebody had leaked out and said, hey, there's going to be a different type of Fortnite, then that would have killed them. Like that would have made people like, oh, we don't want to change Fortnite. We don't want to do this. Instead, they just did it. And then people played it and they were like, oh yeah, it's pretty good. And they're still the biggest money making battle royale on the market.
Yeah, and that's tough because there are a lot of different moving parts in Fortnite, right? You don't want to break any particular part of the building or the shooting or the power-ups. Chris, what are your thoughts?
I was going to say it's kind of the same. I mean, if you look at especially AMD's CPU sector, like they were basically coming off a really good showing with their 1000 series, and like with their 2000, 3000 series, they were basically saying that there were leaks that they were higher, and they were leaking on things like 3D Mark, which is a benchmark service basically that you can get on Steam, and like you could see some of these benchmarks showing up before the product even came out, and so some of them were spoofed, some of them were potentially leaks, and so it's hard to gauge what is true and what is false.
So that's kind of where data mining's a little different, because these people are pulling code and showing in the code where they're grabbing these bits from. So they kind of have receipts, if you will, to back them up so people know that what they're saying is true.
Right. And what I'm saying is like the leaks for AMD, people were showing their receipts to try to make them seem true.
Yeah, and this is what gets to the root of the problem, in my opinion, right? You have leakers. These leakers, they don't have there's no code of ethics, there's no regulation. If these people had to wait for there to be a good amount of evidence before they quote-unquote reported on something, that would be different. But there's no like journalistic code of ethics on these kind of leaks, and so it can really affect the development or even whether or not a product gets released if there's some kind of data mining going on. And I think that's the problem, right? It's the difference between journalism and data mining. Journalism, okay. Data mining, maybe not okay.
And that's kind of like what's happened. So like in Pokemon Go, there was a lot of data mining about like what the next release of Pokemon will be to the game and things like that. And a lot of times it was wrong, or they found these weird things and they started theorizing and were incorrect. And those were all really just giant leaps of, we think this is what's happening next. And some of those characters came in and broke the game in a lot of ways because they came in wrong. But Apex, to come back to that, what they did, because this was becoming a problem for them and they really didn't like it, actually put a fake character into their game code, so people found it, named Forge. And then they did this like crazy bait and switch where they have the character trailer where they're like announcing this character, and all these people were ready for it. They already knew it was Forge. They were actually really hyped about it. So like you guys were saying, they were talking about it, getting really excited, saying this is going to be a great character. We're really stoked on it. And then all of a sudden, like, he's like this smooth talking corporate sponsored legend, like real businessman. And then this guy just comes up behind him during this interview he's in and shoots him in the head. And then the real character is the guy who shot him in the head that they released that day. So they did this whole big fake character trailer just to be like, haha, you guys probably shouldn't dig so hard. We told you we don't like this.
Which is kind of a brilliant approach, right? Because the whole
awesome.
bait and switch red herring thing hasn't really been done before. And throwing people off the trail like that seems like it's a thing that could be really important. It's interesting because I'm torn. Because what I want is for developers to respond to the community in a way that's actually meaningful. So many times if you look at the lead up to Diablo 3, where people are like, I don't know about this whole auction house thing. Seems like it could kind of ruin the whole game, and they did it anyway, right? Like a little bit of community feedback there would have gone a long way. Versus like people spilling things on the internet that developers want to be a surprise. Like I know that they want things to be a surprise, but also they got to do their research.
But I think that's like ultimately it's not the job of these data leakers. There's beta testing for a reason. And I hear it so often on that being the issue, where it's like they're not listening to the people in general. So we have beta testers for a reason. And if something isn't working, the audience should be listened to, not necessarily it needs to come from data mining.
Does Apex Legends have a test realm?
No.
They probably should.
Do any of the battle royales have a test realm?
PUBG does. I think Warzone. No, not Warzone.
No, Warzone doesn't.
A question here. Other than like disappointment or overexcitement or just general babbling going on in the community, what damage like comes from this? Except like it's easy in the case of like over promising and under delivering.
A lot of times people are going to do data mining to figure out puzzles that developers put into games. A big one was in Halo 3. They had the I would have been your daddy's skull was hard to get because there was like you had to like walk through 3 different holograms in a certain order in order to get it. And there was a guy who went online. Of course, this was way back, so there weren't as many avenues for this. But there was a guy who like went into the code, found the I would have been your daddy's skull, and then like worked backwards to see, what did they do to get that? And so basically it was bypassing the puzzle that the developers put in there to find that stuff to figure out what the stuff was.
And then there's...
That doesn't bother me.
Well,
there was another puzzle there.
Then there's... True, but then there's the added thing where, like, if developers didn't have to worry about people data mining, can you imagine the amount of coding that you have to use to mask or disguise or to hide the things that you're in development for when you're in development for them? Like, certain characters, you may have to develop entire new, like... sections of code in order to put the character into the game, and disguising that probably takes a lot of extra time. So really, we could be robbing ourselves of content by doing this amount of data mining.
I mean, that's getting into like the argument of having like de novo, so something that makes it so you can't crack a game in like for piracy. I mean, I think it's one thing to be able to data mine a game and figure out some of its content. It's another to try and pirate a game, but like to shield your code that way and to not think that you're going to get some of that seen is a little bit ridiculous, I think, and inefficient, and that becomes a performance issue.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that being software, it's part of the game to be able to data mine,
to like be able to go in and crack the code.
Yeah.
It's kind of like making every game hacknet, I guess, whenever you think about it.
Yeah. I mean, to me, like
that's great.
I prefer to be surprised.
I think me and
that's
Allison,
your choice.
Yeah, I think Allison and I are both on the same.
And
like,
you can do that by not looking at any of that.
That's
true.
I would
None
just
of
have
the-
to not be on the internet.
You don't have to data mine.
How
things.
many times? No. How many times?
No, I
do
have
you
to data
Google
mine things.
anything. You Google anything, and the first thing that pops up is a headline for something you weren't looking for, and it like ruins your life.
Very infrequently, actually.
Google Star Wars, and the first thing is like, by the way, Darth Vader is Luke's dad.
It's like, no!
Actually, I'm pretty sure the Google algorithm does not do
true. But Allison, you did that with Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? You didn't even like look at, you didn't play the test, you didn't do any of that kind of stuff.
Right. I didn't on purpose, so I didn't know what was coming from this. But it's like this Apex thing. I'm talking about it today, not because I was trying to find this article, but because I found it fascinating because I looked up Apex and the first thing was about this character that was data mined. So that's my argument. It's like, I don't even know Apex. I don't play it, but I found this fascinating. So there it was right in my face, just looking up Apex to try to see what the characters were.
Very interesting. Well, listeners out there, do you want to get the latest word for any given game as soon as possible, or would you rather be surprised? Let us know your thoughts on data mining. You can hit us up on Instagram, on Facebook, or on Twitter. Stick with us. Second half, we're going to talk about the tyranny of choice. Be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do remain calm. We are at our cruising altitude, and you may feel just a little bit of turbulence here. Nothing to worry about. Just keep your seatbelts fastened and stay out of the bathroom. We should be fine. As always, if you have any problems, just press the button above your seat, and the flight attendants will be along to help you. Thank you very much.
Welcome back to the second half of the Game Brew Podcast episode. Is this 78, 77? How drunk am I?
78.
78, thank God. And are we still enjoying the beer?
Hell yeah.
It's moist.
I've had a couple too many.
And
okay.
it's brilliant. Yeah, it's a good
It is a good beer.
I actually switched on to Looser Cannons, which is double cannon by double.
I also am doing that as well.
It's a double IPA.
I like
Higher
it.
alcohol
loose.
content. Message to all my ex-girlfriends. Get ready for some text messages later.
Here we
High
go. Well, what? So the second half of the podcast, particularly, I wanted to talk about this thing sort of known as the tyranny of choice, right? So these days, we have a lot of game platforms.
Is this a title that you gave it yourself, or is this a thing?
I feel like
Like
someone
if I
else.
look up the tyranny of choice on Google,
Yeah,
Ian's
Will this
picture
come
will
up?
be right there.
I feel like someone probably invented this phrase that wasn't me for something else, but I'm using it, and I don't know. Maybe I invented it myself. I have no idea. But what I'm talking about is the fact that we have so many options with video games now that it's actually hard to choose or to find something new to invest your time in because you have so many options that it's kind of paralyzing. It's like when you look at a restaurant menu and there are like 64 different choices spread across 3 different pages, and you're like, I don't know what I want. Whereas you look at a restaurant menu that has like 7 different choices, and it's really easy to narrow down the things that you like and the things that you do not like. And I think that same thing is true for video games, where we have free games coming out of the Epic Store. We have sales on Steam. We have Humble Bundle. We have Epic Game Store giving stuff out for free. We have the Xbox and PlayStation games that just show up every month. And so we have all these choices, and yet I personally find myself replaying the same games that I've been playing for a long period of time. And I think a lot of that is because I feel paralyzed by the number of options that I have. So the question I wanted to ask was, is choice a good or a bad thing? And if it's a bad thing, what do we do about that? So, Will, it sounds like you have some feelings.
I definitely have some feelings on this. This is something that I seriously struggle with. I've got a PlayStation. I used to have an Xbox as well, and a PC. I've got a Switch. I've got an older 3DS. I've got a PlayStation 1 sitting right here. I've got an old Game Boy, and all the things you mentioned. Like, there's so many games, and there's so many great games on past consoles that I never got to. And there's so many great new ones that are releasing. It's like, what do I play? How do I spend my time? Because you cannot play all the games. So I very frequently find myself like scrolling through the Steam store for like an hour when I could be playing a game for an hour, but I'm looking for that thing that just makes me want it, and that comes so few and far between now. And I think that's because I'm looking at the Steam store, I'm looking at the Switch store, I'm looking at the PS4 store. It's everywhere.
I think that has a lot to do with the mentality that we're in as a society right now, with like the Netflixes and the Disney Pluses and now like the Game Pass and PlayStation Now is what it's called,
PlayStation Now.
And all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, you have literally, this is a daily thing for me. I go to Xbox Game Pass and I just scroll through all the titles. I don't download any of them. I just scroll through to look at them and go, in a very Marie Kondo style, does this spark any love for me?
Joy. Does this spark joy?
Joy.
I'm drunk. Just leave me alone. But the Marie Kondo would love me. I'm adorable. But it's like, yeah, there's so many things that there was a joke around April Fool's where it's like Netflix was just going to release a Netflix scroll, which is literally just scrolling through a version of Netflix where you just scroll through and watch movie trailers instead of actually watching the things.
Yeah, but what's interesting, Dan, is you say that you have a hard time focusing on things, and yet you are one of the leaders in our blah 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 competition, and so really
he is the leader.
You do manage to find focus. So I'm wondering, how do you choose what it is, those things that you are going to do? And do you think that the fact that you have all these other choices inhibits that, or does it just like lead to this strange background frustration?
I think it's mostly the dedication that I have to, once I start something, I have to finish it.
Okay.
Which recently, like most of the time I start a game, I like say, I'm going to finish this thing before I move on to the next thing, which is very frustrating. I played a game called Vampire, Vampyr, which has some really good ideas about stuff to do. Like it had like this RPG-esque, if you suck the blood of one of the people in this area, it destabilizes the region. So you have to be careful about who you like suck blood from. It's very RPG-esque, but the gameplay was really repetitive and boring. So I didn't finish it. And that killed me because I was like, I told myself I downloaded this game, I'm going to finish this game. And then I didn't do it. So I moved on to something else, and I'm still obviously a little torn up about it because I'm talking about it right now with you guys.
When something interesting to think about is when, I remember back when I had just a Nintendo Entertainment System, my little gray box there that you slammed cartridges into. That I didn't have a lot of choices. I probably had like maybe 3 or 4 games at any given time.
And what that meant, shit with those.
That meant was that I played the bejesus out of all of those games. I knew them frontwards, backwards, and upside down. And it led to a different kind of mastery than now, where I'm playing a little bit of Hearthstone, I'm playing a little bit of Rocket League, and I'm playing a little bit of Animal Crossing. I'm getting back into not Ocarina of Time, to Octopath Traveler, right? Like my interests and my play styles are very diffuse, whereas earlier in my life they were very focused. And I think some of that, at least, is due to choice.
So I have a couple things I think about this. I think of this a way different way from you guys. So for me, when I game, you'll notice I don't finish a lot of stuff.
What?
Same.
And it's not that I don't want to finish it, because I do desire that. I just tend to really draw out games way longer than they ever should be drawn out, for one, because I like enjoying, and I don't want to miss anything. So I really dig into every little nook and crevice, even if it's a game that doesn't have that a lot. But with that, I'll pick up a bunch of different games, do it for just a minute, and then I'll put it down and come back to it later because I've probably exhausted the 2 levels in that game so much that I don't want to play with it for a minute.
I don't think that's a bad thing. I just wanted to put that in there. I think that's a good thing to want to spend more time with content that you love. So
yeah, it is. But I also just don't. I'll get a bunch of games, dump them in my library that I want to play, but I won't actually get to them because I know I need to dedicate a lot of time to them.
I do the same thing. And that's one thing that like the whole competition to finish games has been good for me, because I am terrible at finishing games. I struggle with it.
This whole contest was actually an intervention for you.
Chris,
I think it kind of started out
Chris,
as that.
I love you.
Maybe.
You have been a friend of mine for a very long time, and I just wanted to say that I think your problem with video games is something that has come between us in our relationship.
It's okay, Ian. It's okay. It's okay, man.
No, I mean, I probably have the most extensive Steam library out of all of us. And looking through it, it's kind of fucking ridiculous. And there's so many good games through it. And I just...
Do you have trouble picking, though? I guess is this topic. Do you ever just look at it and go, I don't know, I can't do this right now?
I do. I mean, like...
Yeah, that's daunting.
I do. Like, I'm looking through it, and like I'm seeing like all these games that I would love to play. And like I would, you know?
I would.
Like
I would.
Yeah, like I'm looking, and especially with the new Steam, the way they display it on Steam, it's like, I want to play this. I want to play that too. And like I'm just going through all these hundreds of games, almost 1,000 games that I have on my computer, and I just don't know how to choose sometimes.
So, why do you think that is? Like, because I spend almost as much time looking for like the game that I want to be playing as like playing the game when I finally find it in that same like time frame or that same day that I'm doing this. And I feel like it's because as a society we're so accustomed to being able to find what we want. It's like, I want juicy fruit. Shit, no, I want wintergreen, spearmint. We can get whatever we want whenever we want it at any time, from food to games to movies to TV shows. And like, there's so much. Like, how are you supposed to find that one thing when you can have anything? How do you find that one thing that really is what you want? Now, how do you even know what that is? Because you can have anything. How do you know what you want?
Yeah, I just want to put this in there. What you're describing is called the Veruca Salt syndrome from Charlie and the Chocolate
Is
Factory.
that the girl that was like, it had everything?
She got everything that she wanted.
Daddy, I want it.
Daddy, I want it now.
That one.
She got everything that she wanted, and so whenever she couldn't have something, it killed her. And I think that's the opposite of what we have as a generation. We're millennials, real millennials, not the ones that boomers complain about. But we had a lot of time where we had like cartridge-based systems, things we had to ask our parents to go buy. And then once we became adults, just like, oh, you're not allowed to drink soda on Friday nights. You're not allowed to drink soda on Friday nights. Once you go to college, guess what, Mom and Dad? I'm going to drink as much soda on Friday night as I gosh darn want.
Soda.
Dang it. So it's the same thing with video games.
I think it's easily like defined to people who don't understand it as like kind of the idea of over sexualization in media kind of desensitizing you in ways is the idea. So it's kind of the same thing here, where it's like we just have so many options that we're a little desensitized to the fact we have so many options.
Who would be interested in having a game platform like Epic or Steam, where instead of having all of the games possible at your fingertips, there were 4 games a month? And not only that you could choose from, but those were the only games that you could play.
I don't want to do that. Don't tell
See,
me to do that.
I would be totally into this because
Would you? Okay, go to your local Walmart and buy the 4-in-1 console.
No, because what I'm saying is that having a smaller set of things to choose from means you could be discovering new things that you never would have played.
That's a good point.
Whereas all of this choice means that we pigeonhole ourselves into things we already think we're going to.
That is what the Xbox Live and PS4 Game Passes, I guess, or like the things that you get for being signed up for those online services is. It's exposing you to games that you're not going to normally get. And they're usually very good games.
But are you going to play them amidst everything else you have access to?
Right. I mean, like for me, like Final Fantasy VII just came out. It took over everything that I just did this past weekend.
Yeah, because he finished it.
Before, yeah, right, because I finished it. Before that, Doom Eternal and Animal Crossing took over everything I just did before that. And also, I didn't talk about it, but Mountain Blade Bannerlord, which has been coming out for decades. It's been like almost there for decades. So like it's one of those things where like there's games that like pique your interest, but like then there's also games that are straight up your alley or straight just things that you've been waiting forever for, and they just take over everything.
I actually think that the point about the services is one that I would argue with, because I think if the point is to focus choice down to the point where we kind of have to choose something that like maybe we're a little bit interesting, or maybe we're not interested at all but willing to take a chance on, then it needs to be much smaller. I think there are way too many games in Game Pass for it to be a curated list of like, hey, maybe this is only 4 games, but these are 4 games that you've never heard of that are going to blow your fucking mind. I would be into that.
Well, that's what I kind of like about Humble Bundle.
But Humble
That's like
Bundle,
Humble Bundle or like the Apple Essential Picks or something like that.
Yeah, Humble Bundle is probably the closest, I think, that gets close to it. Because I've discovered whole new genres on Humble Bundle that I never would have played before because it forces me to choose between those things. Like Zachtronics games. Now I'm into Zachtronics games because of Humble Bundle. But I still think maybe that's a tiny bit too much choice.
Because you're forced to choose.
Maybe this is like my Ian Richard, like, I just need to copyright. This is like the curated games podcast for the Ian Richard. It's these games, and you're going to play them. I don't know. Allison, what were you thinking?
As a whole, people say the gaming market is oversaturated. And that's kind of what we're discussing here, is the oversaturation of games. And I don't see that as a negative.
No, definitely not.
I think
it's like saying there's too many books out there.
Right. It's just such a wild positive.
Goddamn movies keep coming out.
Because it's important to have like those games that aren't AAA or that aren't like, you know, if you had your like Epic store doing just 4 games, it would be their 4 best games, so they sold. That's what they're going to look at more than
or the 4 most generic games.
So right, the ones that are going to reach the most. They're going to look at it with a marketing mind rather than a interesting gameplay mind to give you something different. There may be one of those 4 that would be a really offbeat game that you may end up loving and never would have heard about. But I think the beautiful thing about things like Humble Bundle and those kinds of things are they do throw those good ones with the little ones. And yeah, you're getting a ton in that grab, but you're getting a really nice shoot that's all over the map. So you've got the ones that people want to buy, but then you get those additives that are just like special little gems that you end up loving.
Yeah, we're going to go to Will here in a second. But Will, Dan, can you remind us what our link to a Humble Bundle is in case people are wondering?
It is bit.ly/gamebrew. That's bit.ly/GAMEBREW. If you go there, you get lots of cool game options. You also donate to some charities, and you support us with some money. So Dan, definitely do it.
Dan, you need to do like a crazy like carpet seller TV commercial, like local TV ad version of that at some point.
I will definitely do that.
Okay.
I will. Hey, come on down to the Game Brew Carpet Warehouse. We got all your Game Brew carpet needs, everything. You want a game? You want a carpet that looks like it's been stained by 19 different G Fuel things? We've got it for you. Hey, do you want a carpet that looks like you haven't moved your chair off it in 4 years? Hey, we've got that carpet for you too.
Bill, sorry, what were you going to say really before we completely derailed?
No, it's fine. Something that I have been toying with, and by toying with, I mean for like 6 years I've been toying with this, and I still haven't actually done it. Exclusives that I really want always pull me into getting like every console that's out there. But I have been thinking really hard. I know. Yeah, I have been thinking so hard this year because I did this with books. I took all my books and I jammed them like in a damn cabinet where I can't see them, and I'm allowed one book at a time, and I absorb it so much more and so much better. And I'm trying to do that with video games. I am seriously considering like picking a console that I purchase in 2020, and in 2021 I don't get anything else. Period.
You're
I get
so
zero.
full of
I
shit,
get
Will.
no upgrades.
Yeah, that's
so
bullshit.
full
You're
of
not going to do
nothing.
that. We know how you work, and that's not going to be the thing that happens.
No. Hear me out. I like Microsoft has kind of solved this problem for us in some ways. Like, I don't need an Xbox. I have a computer.
Okay.
I can have my computer and my PS5 and I can be fine. Or just my Switch and I can be fine. The thing about the Switch is it already has everything on it that's already on the other systems.
No, all you need is a PC. It'll come out for it eventually.
That's true.
The only game that hasn't come out for it eventually that I can think of that actually matters is Bloodborne.
Yeah, but you're wrong.
What game came out for PC that actually was relevant that's not Nintendo?
I mean, you just blew off an entire console then.
Yeah, that's an entire console, Chris.
Okay, so yeah, I'm talking about, like, he already has a Switch. I know that.
Yeah. Well, do you guys think you could do that? Do you think you could, like, pick a thing and just go with it?
Yeah, I would pick PC. Like,
what you're saying is the reason that you would choose PC is because PC is not a choice.
Versatile.
It does everything.
It does everything. So
it's like
Will
a good
is saying
running back.
is, I want to choose one thing to do one thing.
No, I'm too American to do that.
It's so hard.
I think there would be benefit to doing that.
I mean, literally, I bought a PS4 last year because Final Fantasy VII was coming out this year. That is why I bought it.
And you haven't even played it yet.
No, not yet. I haven't been paid yet this week.
But that's kind of it for me. Like, I don't want to be restricted. So I've always, like, slowly bought every console as I can afford, or as a game comes out that I'm like, I can no longer live without it. And so I couldn't see myself just limiting myself to one device for the sake of limiting my choices.
But what if you didn't have to?
Chris, what I'm saying is that aside from
Final Fantasy VII is coming out on PC.
God of War didn't.
But maybe it might. Who knows?
what I'm trying to say is that aside from your self-imposed rules of like, okay, I'm going to finish game, your focus is up to you. But if you wanted to find a way to focus that wasn't necessarily self-imposed, you could choose a platform and that would focus for you to a degree.
It would.
And there's value to that, is what I'm saying.
There is value to that, but I don't know if I want that.
I think a great deal of creativity oftentimes comes from defining the bounds. You look at like advances in art in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
What you're looking at is like a certain rule set that people they work with for a long period of time. You know, it's
art especially is dependent upon the medium. And like there's so many different types of arts. And like whatever medium that you're using for it just changes whatever it is. It could be clay, could be metal, could be glass.
Some of the games that I love most playing on PC are only PC specific games that could not work on other consoles or other platforms. And because I am a primarily PC gamer, I hate that term.
Yeah, term sucks.
Nothing wrong
term
with
sucks.
that term.
Term sucks. I tend to gravitate towards them because I don't get the chance to play them as much, I guess. If that makes sense.
What I'm trying to say is that making a limited set often leads to creativity or to understanding things about something that you wouldn't have understood elsewhere, right? Limited set, deeper understanding. And the same is true, I think, in terms of choice of video games. You have fewer games to choose from, you're going to understand each of those more than you would if you had a great breadth of things to choose from. But that's not necessarily true, right? So audience, what do you think? Let us know on our Instagram, on our Facebook, on our Twitter. At The Game Brew is our handle on all of those things. And I think we're going to call it a night.
In the Discord.
Oh, and in the Discord, which has been super lit lately.
Yo, it's been popping.
AF.
If you listen to the Game Brew podcast and you're not in the Discord,
you're missing
out. Because as somebody who lives by themselves and doesn't get a lot of human interaction these days, it is nice to disagree with people in a different area.
Yeah, we've got people that agree, we got people that disagree, we got people that aren't involved with our podcast, but have been talking with us, and
I would like to say I am a
super
master
cool.
debater. Like, I master debate all the time.
He debates hard.
But yeah, and that's bit.ly/discobrew, bit.ly/discobrew.
Come join the fun. All right, that's it. Say goodnight, everybody.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
Gute Nacht, meine Freunde.
Did we land?
We did. Hello, here we are in our new destination. The bi-weekly video game podcast where, in the event of an emergency. Oh, okay, sorry.
You want to try again?
There's a typo. Okay?
That was
Do
me.
you want to try again?
Hold on.
Listen,
I'll fix it. I'm
the
fixing it. Hold on.
teleprompter's fucking wrong. Fix the fucking teleprompter.
Ian will read whatever's
Fuck it,
on that
we'll do it
teleprompter,
live.
guys.
Ian will read whatever you type.